Hey everyone, this is Derek here and welcome to another video. Today I want to talk about the AirPods and my experience with them. I purchased this set of AirPods around 6 months ago, and since then I've been formulating an opinion on them, what's good, what's bad, and what I potentially would change. And I wanted to share that with you. So first, my experience with the AirPods is limited to use with an iPhone 7 Plus and later an iPhone 10 or X, and an iPad Mini 4 and an Apple Watch Series 2. So I haven't used the AirPods with any other devices. I did set them up once with a Windows laptop just to make sure that the AirPods would work with a non-Apple product. However, the majority of my use of the AirPods is with my iPhone 10, and it was with my iPhone 7 Plus before I got the 10. So first, I'll talk about what I like about the AirPods. And one of the first things is the easy setup. So the AirPods use Apple's W1 chip, which is a chip that Apple designed to make setup very seamless when you're using the AirPods with an Apple product. So it's a combination of NFC and Bluetooth, and basically the setup is as easy as opening the AirPod case next to a compatible Apple product, waiting until it finds the AirPod case, and then pairing with it. And the whole process took about like 10 seconds on my iPhone, and I didn't even have to repair when I upgraded from the iPhone 7 Plus to the 10, so that's another added advantage. So the easy setup is definitely something I want to see come to competing products, because right now I feel like there's no easier experience or more seamless experience than the AirPods with an Apple product. And the next positive I want to talk about is the music battery life. Now, I understand this is a polarizing issue because it's both a positive and a negative, as you'll see, but for music, so this is just pure music, so Apple Music, Spotify, Pandora, music just in your Apple iTunes library, whatever it is, you get about 5 hours. Now, that really depends on the volume, the level that you're listening to, as well as how much bass there is in the music. There's some variability, but I found that 5 hours is a conservative estimate for how I listen to music, which is usually around half volume or so. So if you're listening to it louder than that, you might get closer to 4.5 hours, but it's still pretty good because as fast as these things charge up, even if you're using them at work, say, to listen to a podcast or listening to like Sirius or streaming some radio, then if you take a lunch break or go to the bathroom or whatever and you pop them in the case for 5-10 minutes, you'll get a few more hours of listening time. So I feel like Apple really did a good job with the music playback time, because 5 hours is quite a bit. And like I said, as fast as it recharges, it's not. It was never something that I found myself lacking in. And the next thing I want to talk about is the range. So the wireless range on these AirPods is very, very good. I've been on different floors before with them, and I've been around 50 feet away or so, and I've maintained a pretty solid signal. It's a lot better than Bluetooth headsets I've used in the past, and I'd go as far as to say that unless you're going with a much larger headphone, the range in these is as good as you're going to get in this sort of form factor. And again, that's with an Apple product. I can't vouch for the range with, say, an Android phone, just because I don't have any experience with that. So the next thing was sound quality. Now, I understand this is another, controversial point, because some people say that these sound no better than the EarPods. Some people say that, well, you're paying a lot of money for them, so they're going to sound better, or they should sound better. I found that they sound very, very similar to the current generation of EarPods, the ones that come with like the iPhone 7, 7 Plus, 8, 8 Plus, and 10. However, I feel like just not having a wire there is definitely something that you don't have to worry about pulling. You don't have to worry about them shifting position in your ear as much. So that's one of those things where I'd say that the sound quality is quite good for what they are, as long as you're not expecting too much. You have to think about what sort of soundstage these are going to produce, because they are an open design. They're not noise canceling, so you can't expect them to perform as well as your over the ear Sennheiser or any decent audio brand because, well, they're just not designed for that. The drivers are a lot smaller, and Apple had to fit everything into these little ear pods. So I said, as long as you're not unrealistic, I feel like the sound quality is quite good. The bass was actually a little better than I thought it would be. I think the bass sounds a little better than the EarPods. However, again, with an open design, you're never going to get that much bass just because you're not isolating your ear canal from the outside world. And one of the last things I want to talk about under the good section is the case that comes with the EarPods. So this case has held up very well to being put in my pocket, put in my jacket, my backpack, whatever. It's been thrown around a bit, and it's very solid plastic. The latch still feels very solid. It still snaps closed. It stays closed. There's not a lot of shifting. And I feel like, other than looking like a little cart or a container of dental floss, which is objectively a good or bad thing, I'd say that the case is very well built, and I'm quite impressed with how well it's holding up. You can see it scratched if you look under the lights, but again, it honestly looks quite good for as much as I've used it, which is pretty much every day over the past 6 months. So now I want to move on into the bad section, so what I haven't liked as much about the AirPods. And like I said in the beginning of the video, I have a generally pretty positive impression of them. I would buy them again if I lost this pair or if they broke. However, they're definitely not without their faults. So one of the first issues I have, and I have this quite frequently, is I have my phone in my pocket and I'm listening to music, and then you get that song that's a lot softer or a lot louder than the song before it, and you want to adjust the volume. And you don't want to be that person who's asking Siri in public to adjust your volume. So you either have to reach into your pocket to change the volume on your phone, or you can use the Apple Watch if you have the Apple Watch open to the Now Playing app. And the dial, the crown on the watch, is a lot easier to adjust the volume on. However, it's assuming that you have an Apple Watch, which is another big assumption, because if you're spending money on these AirPods and you're spending money on an Apple phone, I think it's pretty unreasonable to expect you to also spend money on an Apple Watch just to more easily adjust the volume. So that's definitely something that I want to talk about at the end of this video, how I would improve that. And it's just an idea I have, and there are a ton of different ideas. But I feel like something has to be done because that's one of the biggest complaints I have. And along that line, gesture control. So right now you can double tap. If you have it set up, you can double tap your AirPods, either the right or the left, and they can perform one of a couple actions, not many. So what we'll do right now is we'll go into the Bluetooth settings on my phone, on my iPhone, and then I'll go ahead and I will show you what you can do. So here you go. This is the Derek's AirPods setup screen, and you can see here double tap on AirPods. So you have an option for left as well as right ear, but there aren't a lot of options there. It's basically Siri, play, pause, next track, previous track, and off or disabled. And that's all you get. And worse than that, the issue I have at least is that the gestures aren't always recognized. So sometimes you really have to exaggerate them to get the AirPods to recognize them consistently. So you have to tap pretty hard on them and just to get it to be recognized every time. So I would say that improving the gesture recognition would definitely be something that I would want to see improved. Now, along the lines of battery life, I said earlier that I really liked how the battery life on music is 5 hours. The battery life for call quality, for using them as a Bluetooth headset, on the other hand, is around 2 hours. And that's pretty short. And how I've gotten around that is I've used the AirPods one at a time, and then I'll swap them out as they're getting low if I'm on a conference call or if I'm on a call that's, I'm expecting to last that long. But 2 hours just really isn't that much. And that's because the AirPods are also acting as a microphone. So when you're listening to music, that microphone, which is in the bottom of each AirPod, is disabled. And when you're using them for a call, then obviously you need to enable that. So that's going to increase the power demand on that. And then you're also sending data back to the iPhone, whereas when you're streaming music, sending data to the AirPods, so they're receiving instead of transmitting. And battery degradation is another thing that it's just a reality. It's a fact of life with these tiny electronics with tiny batteries in them. But 2 hours is what Apple quotes for your expected, whatever expected time to use them as a headset, or use them on a call. And I found that over 6 months it has degraded slightly. I get about an hour and 45 to an hour and 50 minutes if I run them to when they die now. So whereas before I was getting just about 2 hours. So it's not a terrible issue yet, but they're only 6 months old, and I'd expect that they're probably going to degrade further in the coming months. So I would think a year in or so, I'll probably make another video, but a year in or so, I would expect that the batteries will probably only be lasting around 80-85% of their initial capacity. One other issue, so I have two more negatives, and the first one is to deal with the case. So we talked about the case and how solid it is. Well, and how it uses a magnetic latch, which is great because it's very sturdy and very secure. However, because it's magnetic, there are a bunch of these little magnetic particulates that tend to get attracted to the case. So you can see, it's not the easiest to see on camera. However, it's like right here, here, and then up here. So where all the magnets are, there's 4 clasping magnets for the top. And you can see that there's 1, 2, 3, 4. And then, I don't know if there are also magnets on the bottom or if it's just metal plate, but however it works, basically they attract this dirt that you wouldn't even really expect. They're little magnetic, iron ferrite particulates that must have been hanging around in my pocket or my backpack, or I don't even really know how they get on there, but they start to mar the surface. So if you don't clean them off right away, they tend to just scratch it up, and then they get embedded in there, and now it's very difficult to remove that. So not a huge problem, however, it's definitely frustrating. As far as keeping the AirPods themselves clean, just make sure that you clean them regularly. A lot of people who complain about the degradation in the sound quality, it's because there's a bunch of earwax or other matter that gets stuck in here, which is pretty gross, but it comes out pretty easy. So, just stay on top of that, cleaning that mesh and the plastic around the mesh, because otherwise it will accumulate with whatever's in your ear, which is no good. And the last negative point I wanted to mention is that the experience is not as seamless if you don't have an Apple product. So if you have an Apple product, it's a very seamless experience. Very rarely have I had a delay in connecting to the AirPods. Occasionally it's happened where I've had to open the case a second time to get them to connect to my iPhone, but generally they're very reliable. I'd say 9 out of 10 times they connect the first time when I open the case near the iPhone or the iPad. And what it connects to is dependent on what you are close to when you open the case. So if I open the case next to my iPhone, it'll connect to that. If I open the case next to my iPad, it'll connect to that. And if you're somewhere in the middle, it gets confused sometimes. So just be sure that when you open up the AirPods and put them in your ear, that you do it near whatever product you plan to use with them. So finally, we're up to about 13 minutes probably at this point, so I'll try to wrap it up. And that's what I would like to see changed in the next version of the AirPods. And the first thing is something that we already know is coming to the AirPods, and that is wireless charging for the case. I would love to be able to drop the case onto a Qi wireless charger just like I do with the iPhone, and not have to worry about plugging it in. So that's something we already know is on the way, and I'm excited about it because I feel like that's something I could really use. That way the case will always stay topped up, and I don't have to worry about actually bringing a lightning cable to plug it in, because very rarely do I even plug in my phone anymore. The next thing I'd like to see is better battery life for calls, and I'm not exactly sure how they can do this while keeping the same form factor, other than as components become more efficient and require less power, there should be some efficiency gain that can be converted into battery life. So I suppose what I mean is just, Apple, please keep the same form factor. Don't make them smaller and lighter at the expense of a smaller battery, because you can get away with it because they're not using as much power. I'd much rather see a similar form factor in the AirPods 2 or whatever they call them, and just have longer battery life when using that new, more efficient chipset. I'd like to see a charge indicator on the case, so that's another thing I'd like to see changed. I'd like to, I think that's especially important if you're going to be enabling wireless charging the case, which we know they are, because that way you can easily see what level of case. It could be done with just a couple of status indicator lights. It could be done with 4 LEDs or something like that. And that way you would know what your battery life of the case is, and you know whether or not you have to charge it before you have to go through the trouble of plugging in or opening it up just to check the case battery life. So I feel like an exterior status light would be a good thing, a battery indicator of some sort. And finally, the last change I would like to see is a change in the gesture control or the motion sensing. Right now, it is activated by a touch. So they have little gyroscopes in them, basically, that can detect when you tap on them. And I would like to see some sort of a touch-sensitive feature added to the outside. So that would be added over here. So that way, when you have them in your ear, what you could use is you could use a swipe up or a swipe up or a swipe down to change the volume level. So I know that's been proposed by other people before, and I feel like that's something that they could definitely incorporate in. They've already, years and years ago with the Apple the Apple Mouse. I'm gonna get the name wrong. I think it was the Magic Mouse or the Mighty Mouse, or I don't know, but it's the mouse that has the touch sensitive section built into the top of it. If they could use a similar technology on the outside of the AirPods, then you'd be able to easily adjust volume, or you could even scrub for through a track, or even scroll through multiple songs just by swiping up or down. And you could configure that in the Bluetooth setting option, just like you can do right now for the double tap. So those are my thoughts on the AirPods 6 months in. Like I said, if I lost them tomorrow, I haven't lost them yet, so they actually stay pretty securely in the case when they're not in use. That's great, as long as you remember to always put them in the case. So if I lost them right now, I would definitely buy them again. I'm looking forward to whatever improvements Apple can make in a future revision. Are they worth $150, $160? That's really depending on you. I use them a lot for calls, and a good quality Bluetooth headset is not the cheapest thing in the world, so I get a lot of use in a business sense out of them, as well as listening to music. But that's something, the price is really something only you can or cannot justify. They're not necessary, I'd argue, but just like an Apple Watch, but I'd argue that they are nice to have, and now that I have them, I definitely appreciate them for what they are. So thanks for watching this video, and if you enjoy this sort of content, feel free to subscribe to the channel, and I hope to see you in a future video soon.